By the time Ellie discovered what Walter was hiding behind the locked door, it was too late. The last meal had been served and she was the next ingredient, but she didn't know it. Grendale was the kind of town you only found by accident, a few crooked streets hidden between the trees, where the mist never lifted and strangers were always met with too many smiles. It looked harmless at first glance, but it didn't take much to feel the undercurrent, like something unseen breathing just beneath the ground. Ellie Moore arrived with nothing but a battered suitcase and a fading hope for peace. 26, toughened by cities that had chewed her up and spit her out, she thought a quiet town was exactly what she needed. She was wrong. And then there was Walter Greaves, the man everyone trusted. Mid-40s, always in a flannel shirt, with sharp blue eyes and a voice that could sell prayers to a dying man. Walter owned the hardware store, knew every name in town, and had a handshake that made you feel safe, a little too safe. Their paths crossed within hours of Ellie moving in. Friendly. Helpful. Perfect. But sometimes, monsters don't roar. Sometimes, they bake you a pie, fix your porch, and smile while sharpening the knife behind their back. And in Grendale, smiling faces were just another way to hide the hunger underneath. It didn't take long for Walter to make his move. As Ellie wrestled with a broken porch step on her second day in Grendale, he appeared like a ghost conjured by trouble, sleeves rolled up, toolbox in hand, and that smile, wide enough to almost hide the emptiness in his eyes. "Let me help you with that," he said, already kneeling to fix it before she could answer. His voice was smooth, calm, soaked in the kind of easy charm that made people hand over their trust without a second thought. Neighbors passed by, waving, nodding approvingly at Walter like he was a guardian angel sent to watch over the town. Ellie laughed nervously, feeling a little embarrassed by all the attention. Walter just smiled wider. He refused payment, brushing off her gratitude with a chuckle. "Just helping out," he said. "That's what neighbors are for." But the way he said it, slow, deliberate, made her stomach twist ever so slightly, though she couldn't explain why. That evening, she found a pie cooling on her windowsill, no note attached. Just the unmistakable smell of fresh apples, cinnamon, and something else. Something faint. Metallic. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself he was just being kind. Because in places like Grendale, kindness was the deadliest trap of all. In the days that followed, Walter became a constant in Ellie's life, always appearing when she needed something, always ready with a solution before she even finished asking. A heater fixed before the frostbite could settle. A fence mended overnight after a storm. Fresh loaves of bread left silently on her porch before sunrise. At first, it felt comforting. Safe. The kind of neighborly kindness that made old towns feel like family. Ellie let herself believe in it, little by little, each act of generosity tightening invisible threads around her wrists. Walter's invitations came next, gentle, casual. "Come by for dinner," he said one evening, handing her a jar of homemade stew, the lid still warm. "Nothing fancy. Just a little recipe passed down from my family." The stew was rich, savory, and different. Ellie couldn't place the taste, something darker lurking beneath the familiar spices. She pushed the thought away, embarrassed by her own suspicion. He smiled when she finished the bowl, watching her with a strange intensity that sent shivers under her skin. "You must have a strong stomach," he said, almost to himself, chuckling afterward as if it were nothing. And still, Ellie stayed polite. She smiled. She accepted another meal. Because that's the thing about traps, they're never ugly at first. They taste like home. They smell like comfort. And by the time you feel the barbs cutting into your flesh, you're already bleeding. At first, the signs were almost too small to notice. A glance that lasted a second too long. A comment that brushed too close to her skin. Ellie told herself she was overthinking it, that Walter was just a lonely man in a lonely town. But unease has a way of finding its way under your skin, no matter how tightly you try to seal it. One evening, after another friendly dinner, thick cuts of meat drenched in dark gravy, Ellie caught Walter staring at her from across the table, not with affection or friendliness, but with something hungrier. His knife scraped against his plate, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the resistance of the meat. She laughed it off with an awkward joke. Walter only smiled wider. "You have a good appetite," he said softly. "It's rare these days. People waste too much." Another day, while she helped him carry supplies to his basement, a place he never allowed anyone before, she caught a glimpse of something through a half-closed door. A large butcher's table. A drain in the center of the floor, stained a dark brown that no amount of bleach could hide. Walter noticed her glance and quickly shifted, standing between her and whatever secrets the basement walls tried to spill. He laughed easily, but this time it was hollow. "Old houses hold old stains," he said. "Nothing to worry about." But Ellie's gut twisted tighter. Because old stains don't smell like fresh blood. And sometimes, the things we pretend not to see, are already feasting on us from the inside out. The storm rolled in faster than the forecasts had warned. Thick, angry clouds devoured the sky, and within minutes, Grendale's frail power lines surrendered, plunging the town into cold, absolute darkness. Ellie's house, old and barely insulated, became a frozen tomb. She bundled herself in every blanket she could find, but the cold gnawed through them, seeping into her bones. No heat. No light. No signal. And then, the knock. Walter stood on her porch, lantern in hand, his silhouette stretched long and distorted by the storm's angry flashes. His smile was steady, almost tender. "Terrible night to be alone," he said, his voice almost lost under the howling wind. "Come stay with me. I've got a generator. Warm food. Hot coffee. You shouldn't be freezing to death when there's no need." Every instinct screamed for her to say no. To bolt the door and ride out the cold. But survival has a funny way of rewriting fear. Hypothermia was real. Walter's danger was still only shadows and suspicion. Ellie grabbed her coat and followed him into the storm. Walter's house glowed warmly in the distance, a golden oasis against the storm. It looked safe. Welcoming. Human. But Ellie didn't notice, or didn't want to notice, how the windows were already dark behind the light. How the curtains were already drawn. How the door clicked just a little too heavily when it closed behind her. Sometimes, death doesn't come with a scream. Sometimes, it invites you inside, hangs your coat, and asks how you take your coffee. The moment Ellie crossed the threshold, something in the air shifted. Walter's house was immaculate, unnaturally so. Every surface gleamed as if it had been scrubbed 1,000 times, but no amount of polish could mask the heavy scent lingering beneath the cinnamon candles and fresh-baked bread, the cloying, metallic tang of old blood masked by sweet rot. The living room was cozy, too cozy. Furniture arranged like a stage set. Blankets folded perfectly. A fire burning in the hearth that somehow gave off no real warmth. Ellie felt the wrongness crawl under her skin like a swarm of invisible ants. Walter chatted easily as he led her through the house, pointing out small comforts, a guest room just for her, a stocked kitchen, the generator humming somewhere below. His voice was warm, smooth, practiced. His footsteps, however, made no sound at all. In the hallway, Ellie noticed doors that didn't belong. Too many. Some slightly ajar, revealing only slivers of darkness and the faintest glint of metal. One door at the end of the hall was bolted from the outside. Heavy chains snaked across its frame, clamped tight. Walter caught her staring. His smile didn't falter, but something shifted behind his eyes, a flicker of something feral, something tired of pretending. "Old houses have their secrets," he said. "It's best to let them sleep." Ellie laughed weakly, pretending not to notice the drop in temperature, the way the shadows seemed to thicken around the edges of the room. But deep down, she knew. This wasn't a home. It was a mouth. And she had just stepped onto its tongue. That night, Ellie lay awake in the guest room Walter had prepared for her. The bed was too soft, the air too thick, and no matter how tightly she wrapped herself in the covers, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was breathing with her in the dark. When sleep finally came, it wasn't merciful. It dragged her into a nightmare so vivid it left splinters under her skin. In the dream, she stood in a kitchen she didn't recognize, a long, sterile room bathed in sickly yellow light. Walter was there, standing over a massive butcher's block, slicing thick slabs of something red and wet. The smell was nauseating, copper, decay, and something almost sweet. He turned to her, smiling the same smile he wore fixing her fence, offering her a plate piled high with meat. She shook her head, backing away, but her body betrayed her, reaching out, taking the plate, lifting a piece to her mouth. The first bite was warm and slick, sliding down her throat before she could stop it. The taste was rich, almost familiar, disturbingly human. She woke with a violent jolt, heart hammering against her ribs, the metallic flavor still coating her tongue. Her hands trembled as she wiped her mouth, but there was nothing there. Just sweat. Or so she thought, until she glanced down and saw the small, crescent-shaped bruises blooming along her forearm, as if someone had gripped her tightly in the night. Ellie told herself it was just a nightmare. Just stress. Just coincidence. But deep down, something ancient inside her knew the truth. In that house, she hadn't dreamed of eating flesh. She had been prepared to become it. The next morning, Ellie moved through Walter's house like a ghost, her body present but her mind spinning in endless, suffocating circles. The dream, or whatever it was, had dug its claws deep inside her, and now every creak of the floorboards felt like a whisper of warning. She told herself she needed to leave. Pack her things, make an excuse, slip out before Walter noticed. But leaving wasn't simple anymore. He watched her too closely now, under the guise of kindness, of concern. While he busied himself in the kitchen, preparing yet another too generous meal, Ellie wandered the living room, desperate for a breath of fresh air. That's when she noticed the bookshelf, a massive thing carved from dark wood, too large and too pristine for the dusty room around it. Something was wedged behind it. Acting on instinct more than thought, Ellie reached into the narrow gap. Her fingers brushed something cold, metallic, tangled in what felt like fabric. She pulled it free, a delicate, gold bracelet, twisted and stained, its surface nicked and worn as if it had been clawed at desperately. It wasn't just any bracelet. Ellie recognized it immediately from a missing persons poster she had seen taped to a gas station window weeks ago. Sophia Harper. 28. Missing for 6 months. Gone without a trace. Until now. The weight of the bracelet in her hand felt heavier than lead, heavier than guilt. It was undeniable. Unescapable. Walter hadn't just been kind. He hadn't just been watching. He had been feeding. And the next course was already being prepared. Walter called her for dinner that evening, his voice light and cheerful, as if nothing in the world could be wrong. Ellie tucked the bracelet deep into her pocket, forcing her shaking hands to steady. She had to act normal. Just a little longer. The dining room was transformed, the table set with fine china, crystal glasses sparkling under the dim chandelier. At the center, a roast glistened under a heavy sauce, the rich aroma filling the air and twisting Ellie's stomach into knots. Walter pulled out her chair like a perfect gentleman. "A special dinner," he said, eyes gleaming. "A family recipe. Very old. Very meaningful." Ellie smiled weakly, her skin crawling. She couldn't afford to refuse. She picked up her fork and knife, slicing a small piece of meat. The texture was wrong, too soft, too slick, but she forced it into her mouth. The flavor hit her like a punch. Iron. Salt. A hint of something sweet rotting beneath the surface. Her stomach rebelled instantly, but she swallowed, keeping her face neutral. Walter watched her closely, the corners of his mouth twitching into a smile too wide, too eager. "You have good taste," he said softly. "Not everyone appreciates something authentic." Ellie wiped her mouth, trembling. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to scream, to fight. But she stayed. She had to know. Had to be sure. Walter raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he toasted. Ellie clinked her glass against his, the sound ringing sharp in the silence. And with every bite she forced down, the truth carved itself deeper into her soul. She wasn't eating dinner. She was eating someone's ending. The moment Ellie finished the last agonizing bite, Walter's demeanor shifted. The careful host melted away, revealing something colder, something that had been waiting just beneath his skin all along. "You must be tired," he said smoothly, standing up from the table. "Let me show you to your room. You'll feel better after some rest." Ellie nodded mutely, her stomach twisting, bile burning at the back of her throat. She followed him up the narrow staircase, every step heavier than the last, as if the house itself was trying to swallow her whole. The guest room door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot. She turned the knob, locked from the outside. Panic clawed up her spine. She moved to the window, but the frame was nailed shut. The glass was thick, old, unbreakable without tools she didn't have. The walls, once cozy, now leaned inward, pressing against her like a second skin. Down the hall, she heard him. Whistling. A low, tuneless melody, lazy and mocking. The sound of someone who wasn't worried. Someone who had played this game many, many times before. Ellie pressed her ear to the door, heart hammering. She caught snippets of movement, a dragging sound, the creak of heavy chains, something wet hitting the floor with a sickening slap. She wasn't locked in a guest room. She was locked inside the preparation chamber. And tomorrow, if she was still alive, she wouldn't be Ellie Moore anymore. She would be something else. Something served on a silver platter to the next trusting smile that wandered into Grendale. Hours dragged by, heavy and suffocating, each second stretching longer than the last. Ellie's mind raced for a plan, but the cold iron grip of fear slowed every thought, every movement. She needed to find a way out, and fast. Desperation led her to the floor. Kneeling, she noticed a loose board near the bed, its edge slightly warped. Heart pounding, she pried it up with trembling fingers. Beneath, a narrow shaft yawned open, descending into darkness. With no better option, she slipped inside, dropping into the void below. The fall was short but jarring, and she landed hard on a dirt floor, coughing against the thick, rotten air. It was no ordinary basement. It was a shrine. Rows of butcher's hooks lined the walls, each bearing gruesome trophies, arms, legs, torsos, carefully cleaned, meticulously preserved. Some were fresh. Others mummified into leathery relics. Names were carved into the walls above each piece, like a grotesque family tree. In the center of the room stood a table, thick and stained dark with countless untold horrors. Beside it, jars lined the shelves, filled with pickled organs, marinated flesh, and in some, things too twisted to immediately recognize. Ellie staggered back, bile rising in her throat. She clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle the scream clawing its way up. And then she saw it, a crude butcher's diagram pinned to the wall, marking cuts of meat not from pigs, not from cattle, but from people. Every dinner. Every family recipe. Every bite she had swallowed in blind politeness, it had all been someone. Someone who had smiled, trusted, and been devoured piece by piece. She wasn't just a guest. She was the next course. And Walter was already sharpening the knives. Ellie didn't have time to think. Every nerve in her body screamed move. Now. She bolted toward the far side of the basement, searching for any exit, any weakness in the walls. But behind her, from somewhere upstairs, she heard it, the soft creak of a door opening, followed by slow, measured footsteps descending. Walter was coming. Heart pounding, Ellie tore through the room, dodging hanging limbs and jars that clattered to the ground, shattering and releasing an overwhelming stench of rot. Her fingers scraped against rough stone until they found it, a narrow, rusted service door tucked behind a stack of crates. Locked tight. She yanked and pulled, but the hinges moaned stubbornly. Behind her, the footsteps grew louder, closer, impossibly calm. And then she saw it, a fire axe mounted on the wall, its blade still crusted with old, dark stains. Without hesitation, Ellie seized it. Adrenaline overrode her terror. She swung with all her strength, the blade biting into the weakened wood with a sickening crack. Walter's voice floated through the darkness, soft and almost sad. "You don't have to run, Ellie. I could make you beautiful. Eternal." She hacked again, splinters flying into her face. The door groaned, cracked, buckled. Another step. Another word. "I chose you, you know," Walter murmured. "You were supposed to be special." The third blow shattered the lock. Ellie shoved the door open and stumbled into a narrow maintenance tunnel, damp and pitch black. She didn't hesitate. She ran. Behind her, she could hear Walter's footsteps quicken, the rhythm no longer calm, but hungry. He wasn't chasing her to capture. He was chasing her to butcher. The tunnel twisted beneath the house like an artery, pulsing with Ellie's footsteps and ragged breaths. Every turn bled into the next, and just as she thought she had escaped, a door slammed shut behind her, solid steel, no handle. Lights flickered on. And Walter stood in front of her, calm, composed, holding nothing but a blood-stained apron in his hands. "You ran," he said quietly, almost disappointed. "They always run. Even the ones who begged to stay at first." Ellie backed away, fists clenched, heart hammering. She searched for exits, but there were none. Just the man and the wall behind him, covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. Smiling faces. People from Grendale, from other towns. Victims. Meals. Walter stepped closer, dropping the apron at her feet like a gift. "You think I'm a monster," he said, his voice low and calm. "But I'm an artist, Ellie. Do you understand how rare it is to create something that lives on after death? To preserve the essence of a person in flavor, in ritual?" He gestured to the photos. "I don't just eat. I remember. I honor. Every recipe is a legacy. Every cut is love." Ellie's stomach twisted, bile rising in her throat. But Walter wasn't finished. "You weren't just chosen to die, Ellie. You were chosen to be transformed. I only cook those who leave a mark on me. And you." He stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're going to taste magnificent." At that moment, Ellie understood something worse than death. Walter didn't see his victims as people. He saw them as ingredients in his masterpiece. And she was about to become his signature dish. The tunnel spat Ellie out into a cold, windowless chamber, 4 concrete walls and a single metal door behind her, now locked with a deafening clang. Before she could turn, Walter was already there. Not the neighbor with the easy smile. Not the man who brought pies and promises. The thing that he truly was. His apron dripped with blood, fresh and dark. In his gloved hands, he held a heavy butcher's cleaver, the blade stained black from years of slaughter. "You shouldn't have run," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Now it's messy." Ellie backed into the wall, heart pounding so loud she couldn't hear her own thoughts. Walter advanced without hesitation, the cleaver swinging lazily at his side like an extension of his arm. "This was supposed to be easy," he muttered, his boots splashing in puddles she didn't dare look at. "A clean cut. Quick. Beautiful." He lunged. Ellie dodged by inches, the blade missing her face by a breath. She could feel the wind it carved through the air. Walter was no longer pretending to be human. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, locked onto her like prey. His face twisted not with rage, but hunger, raw, feral, unstoppable. "This isn't just food," he barked as he swung again. "It's survival. It's who we are when we stop lying to ourselves." The cleaver hit the wall, sending sparks flying. Ellie scrambled toward a corner, slipping in something wet. She didn't want to know what. There would be no speeches. No second chances. Walter wasn't here to talk anymore. He was here to carve. Walter charged with a ferocity Ellie hadn't seen until now, not methodical, not patient, but raw, furious hunger. The cleaver arced through the air, whistling inches from her face as she ducked, the blade sinking into the concrete wall with a sickening crunch. Ellie didn't think. She ran. dodging tables, slipping on blood-slick floors. Her only goal was distance, space to breathe, space to survive. Walter ripped the cleaver free, laughing, the sound high and broken. "Run, little girl. It makes the meat sweeter." His boots thundered behind her. Ellie's eyes darted wildly, desperate for anything she could use. Her hand found a broken shard of glass, jagged and trembling in her grip. When he lunged again, she sidestepped with everything she had, driving the glass deep into his forearm. Walter roared, staggering, the cleaver clattering to the floor. She didn't wait. She kicked the weapon away and sprinted toward the far end of the room. A rusted service ladder bolted to the wall, leading upward toward a faint hint of night air. Walter grabbed her ankle mid-climb, yanking her downward. Her chin cracked against the metal rung, stars exploding behind her eyes. She kicked blindly, connecting with his face. Something crunched, nose, maybe teeth, and he howled in rage. Ellie scrambled upward, hands slick with blood, hers or his, she didn't know anymore. She hauled herself into the open air, the bitter cold slapping her awake. But even as she crawled into the night, she could hear him below, coughing, laughing, promising. "You'll never leave me," Walter rasped. "You're already mine." And in a way, part of her knew he was right. Because some nightmares don't end when you wake up. Some of them follow you home, clinging to your skin like the smell of blood you can never wash off. Ellie never remembered how she made it down the mountain road. She ran until her legs gave out, stumbled through fields and forests, her breath slicing the cold night air. Somewhere along the way, headlights found her, a passing trucker who slammed his brakes when he saw the blood, the terror carved into her face. Police reports. Ambulances. Questions she couldn't fully answer. The kind of trauma that doesn't fit into neat little forms. Walter's house was raided days later. Empty. Clean. Gone, like a bad dream retreating into the morning light. The authorities found blood, yes, gallons of it, soaked into the concrete. They found a few severed remains hidden deep underground. But Walter? Not a trace. Not even a footprint. Some said he died in the woods. Some said he ran far, changed his name, and found another Grendale. Another town eager for friendly neighbors. Ellie tried to rebuild her life in another city, far from any place that smelled like pine and wet earth. She changed her phone number. She avoided small towns. She never accepted dinner invitations. But at night, the memories crept back. The clink of silverware. The heavy, sweet smell of cooked flesh. The scrape of Walter's cleaver against the table. Sometimes, when she walked home from work, she would swear she saw him, just a glimpse, standing across the street, smiling. Watching. Waiting. Because monsters like Walter aren't killed easily. They aren't buried with ceremonies and gravestones. They survive in scars, in terror, in the lingering, sickening knowledge that somewhere out there, someone is still setting the table. And they are waiting for you to sit down.